give a fuck when all these haters try to step to me, and I'm just like, fuck you, I'm MC me, catch me in the motherfucking heat, in the motherfucking street, I'm smashing on the gas and I pass all your fucking haters to the left hand side, and I'll just press rewind to the tape, cause that shit was so sick, I wanna hear it one more time, and I never whine, never complain. I got a bunch of bitches, one of them is Mary Jane. I'm pulling up, I'm never playing. Always fucking exotic. I'm smoking on that shit, weed is toxic. Got the gas, I'm about to pass it to my homie left hand side. We all about to go get some ass. You know when you press on the fucking accelerator, where we go fast. That's right. We never get fucking tired. Every place we apply to, we get hired.
Dude, you spit bars.
1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, well, week 4 is in the books, and it's crazy how these weeks are starting to go by faster and faster, it seems. In the NFL, there were a number of games, mainly 5, that were all really close, coming in within 3 points of each other. It all started early in the morning with the Vikings and the Saints in the London game, final score of 28-25. Next, the Falcons defeated the Browns in Atlanta with the final score of 23-20. The Bills and the Ravens, which was supposed to be the highest scoring barn burner match of the week, was the same final score, 23-20, with the Bills narrowly escaping on top. Next, the Patriots beat the Packers, final score 27-24. And last but not least, actually most by far, combined score of 93 points. If I would have told you that Geno Smith and Jared Goff would have starred in the highest scoring game of the week, would you have believed me? Well, it was the Seahawks playing the Lions, with the Seahawks barely coming out over top, final score of 48-45. In the fantasy football world, we had another phenomenon week, what we started calling Tight Ends Day. Now everybody knows that in fantasy the tight ends are usually pretty useless. Unless you have the top 3 guys, then you can't really expect more than 5 or 6 points. If your guy gets like 5 catches for 55 yards, you're pretty happy. If he catches a touchdown, you're fucking stoked. Well, for some reason, as soon as the morning started off and I was watching the morning block of games, I noticed that it just kept being tight ends to score. Tight end score, tight end score. So I looked into it, and actually it didn't take very much looking into. At a certain point, I think we all knew what I had to do. I made a Shroster. A tight end Shroster. And I really wasn't being picky. Now these guys, I really just kind of went down the list. I picked ones that I heard from watching football, and I remembered that they scored a touchdown. So I'm sure that there was maybe a few that I missed that you could have added on here to have a few more points, but I think everybody gets the idea. Okay, so if you combine Mo Alley Cox, Hayden Hurst, Will Disley, Gerald Everett, TJ Hawkinson, Robert Tonyan, Okonkwo, and Pat Freiermuth, all together, they scored 109.6, which would have been enough to beat 5 of you last week. TJ Hawkinson, on his own, hauling in 31.9 points in fantasy, over 8 catches for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. A close second was Mo Alley Cox, 20.5 points of his own. That was with 6 catches for 85 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I don't know, man. Are you guys going to pick up any of these guys and put them in your roster? I don't think so. I think for a lot of these guys it was a phenomenon week for sure. It's just crazy that it happened to be on the same day for all of them. Alright, in the world of our fantasy football league, gotta give a shout out to the Dub Club, Chef, Vaughn, Donnie, Eric, and me. And just like in the NFL, a lot of our matchups ended up being pretty close. Starting off with Chef and Henson's matchup, with the final score of 102-91. Both of Chef's starting wide receivers only hauled in 1 point each, but Austin Eckler was able to make up for it with a 28-point performance. Next up was a matchup between Eric and Greg, with the final score of 111-101. Lamar Jackson didn't haul in 50 points on his own this week for once, but Eric was still able to make up for it when Miles Sanders put the team on his back, scoring 29 points on his own. Next up was the closest game of the week, myself versus Raul. I was able to eke through by the skin of my balls, with George Kittle catching one pass for 20 yards to ultimately save my ass. Going into the Monday night game, though, I was down by 1 point and I completely was ready to lose. I thought that George Kittle wasn't going to make that 1 point. Next up, Edwin and Donnie had a nooner because Edwin's cheeks were clapped before the morning block of games was over. The final score in that matchup was 123 to 85. And finally, our biggest deficit of the week. Actually, a number of unfortunate circumstances combined for Hristo to let him down. Number 1, Carson Wentz was Carson Wentz. Number 2, he had Javonte Williams starting, who's now injured. He's going to be out for a good while. And lastly, he put Mike Evans on his bench. That's 22 points that were just sitting there. Final score in that game was 126 to 73. Next up, I think I'm getting better at making these. Well, it was only a matter of fucking time until Donnie crept up into first. Can somebody fucking beat this guy, please? Next up, Eric went into second place, creeping up by 1 spot with his victory. Henson dropped down 2 places with his loss to Chef, and I was able to hold on to my 4th place. Vaughn jumped up 2 spots. Hristo stayed the same. Greg dropped down 2 spots. Raul stayed the same. And Chef and Edwin are holding hands at the back of the line, playing hopscotch over who's going to take over last place. Alright, and that's going to do it for this week's episode. It might be a little bit shorter of an episode than we're normally used to, but I'm going to be honest, I had an exhausting week. I do have something special planned for next week's episode, so stay tuned, take your Thursday night players out of the flex, and I'll catch you next week on the Fantasy Freestyle Podcast.